Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hawks Latest, your own source for news, updates, rumors, opinions, and you guessed it, the latest and the greatest regarding the Atlanta Hawks. I'm your host, Zach Langley, and today we've got a full slate of updates to break down for you. This is the 219th episode of Hawks Latest presented by FanArt, so hopefully you guys have been enjoying the ride. I know I have, but like I said, we got a whole lot to break down today, so before this video gets started, if you guys could go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, it'd be very much appreciated. It would go a very long way, but yeah, again, packed episode today. You can't win them all. Unfortunately, I wish we could win them all. It'd make this job a lot easier, and it also, just would be a lot more fun. But we practically have been winning them all since the All-Star break, so I can't complain too much. But then, reality hits every now and then, and you fall down to earth. But still, though, Hogs can't hang their heads. But yeah, they suffered a tough home loss last night. They almost pulled it out at the end, but they could not, unfortunately. I was there, of course, and yeah, so the Hawks lost to the New York Knicks. It was their first home loss in 14 games at home. It was one of the most impressive winning streaks in the NBA this season. 13 straight at home is no small feat, but eventually you're going to lose at home, and the Hawks did last night. Although, even though they lost, it's not all negative. It's actually far from it. A lot of positive takeaways from last night. It showed really that the Hawks can compete with any team in the league. We were right there. Things happen, and you lose games. And so from that, we'll also break down a historic performance from Nickeil Alexander-Walker, none other than the guy who should and very well probably will win Most Improved Player. Just an unbelievable season, but he continues to rewrite the Hawks record books in his first season with the team. Just making probably the best first impression ever. And then finally, right before our viewer comment segment, we're going to talk about, we have a few games remaining left in the regular season, just 3 games. That's insane that we're already here. Anyways, but we will take a deep dive into what really lies ahead for Atlanta. Talk about 2 potential playoff opponents. It's going to be a very interesting segment. You're not going to want to miss it because, yeah, we're going to talk about why this team might be more dangerous than people realize, a potential path to the Eastern Conference Finals or the Finals. Just a lot to break down. So without further ado, that was a long intro. Let's go ahead and get started and talk about this loss against the New York Knicks. This one hurts. Every close loss hurts, but especially when, you have a home winning streak on the line that you want to just keep up. And, we have 2 more home games. We have 2 more home games left. We've got a home and home against the Cavs. And then we've got that's not true. We have 1 home game left. It's against the Cleveland Cavaliers because then, we're away against the Cavs on Wednesday, and then we got another game against the Cavs on Friday at home, and then our last game of the regular season is going to be in Miami. My apologies. But yeah, the Hawks fell to the New York Knicks last night, 108-105 at State Farm Arena in a game that came down to the final possession, literally the final possession. CJ McCollum, if that shot had fallen, I was about to lose my mind. Just kind of a summary as to what really happened at the end of that game. With just over a second remaining, Jalen Brunson of the New York Knicks, who had an outstanding fourth quarter up to that point, he calmly stepped up to the free throw line and knocked down 2 clutch free throws to give New York a 3-point lead. It set the stage for what initially looked like one of the most unbelievable moments of the season and one of the most unbelievable moments in Hawks history. I was about to be flexing real hard that I was there in attendance for it. CJ McCollum took the inbounds pass. There was only 1.5 seconds remaining on the clock, mind you. So he didn't have a lot of time to operate, and he definitely held onto the ball for a little bit too long, but he dribbled forward and he launched a deep shot from beyond half court that banked in at the buzzer, looking like it was sending us to overtime. It looked good from the initial just shot, and from my view, it looked like it had gone in. I was like, oh my god, I was freaking out. But yeah, it did not count. And for a brief moment, it looked like we were heading to overtime, but we were not. The Knicks won in regulation. After review, the officials determined that the ball was still in McCollum's hands as time expired. It waved off the shot, and it sealed the Hawks' fate. That was a little bit depressing. It would have been one of the craziest shots ever. Definitely the craziest shot of the season. But just like that, Atlanta's 13-game home winning streak came to an end. And again, like I said earlier in the intro, despite the loss, there were still plenty of strong performances to highlight. It was definitely not all doom and gloom last night. It was actually very far from it. I left encouraged. I left State Farm Arena more encouraged than anything because, again, just so many positive takeaways. Nickeil Alexander-Walker let's talk about him. We'll even give like a full segment just kind of like talking about his breakout a little bit, but also like, the specific record that he broke. I'm sure you guys all know, but if you don't, then I will get into that in the second segment. But yeah, in this game, he led with 36 points. This guy has been unbelievable all season. He steps up to the competition every single time. Like, he never plays down. He never, the moment is never too big for him. Like, the lights are never, ever, ever too bright for Nickeil. Like, I'm so confident with this guy kind of leading the way, like, into the postseason because he has been remarkable. But yeah, 36 points on incredibly efficient shooting, was efficient from start to finish. Aggressive early. He scored 20 points in the first half. Those 20-point first halves just kind of are like routine for Nickeil. Like, it's not even a thing that's like, a rare sighting or something that just hardly ever happens. Like, Nickeil very often is getting these 20-point first halves, and then he's usually keeping up that same production, as the game progresses. But if he doesn't, even still, his first half contributions are very big. But then, he always talks about, just working through fatigue, and just keeping his consistency throughout the night. And yeah, he was able to do that against the New York Knicks. If we were going to win this one, it was really going to rely on Nickeil Alexander-Walker just continuing on what he was building. And we were in good hands if that were the case. And so basically, after that 20-point first half that Nickeil just simply dominated, just hitting difficult shot after difficult shot, Atlanta had actually a 4-point lead heading into the break. They were up 57-53. It was up and down half, but we saw all the right things. And yeah, we went into halftime with the lead. And so, if we're looking at what Jalen Johnson did over the course of the night, he didn't drop no 36, but he continued his All-NBA season. He's probably going to be on All-NBA like second or third team, which will be an incredible feat. But in this one, he recorded his 48th double-double of the season with 21 points and 11 rebounds. His consistency has been one of the biggest reasons this team is even in position to secure a top 6 seed. His efficiency from outside last night was great. He was looking really confident. I wish that he was driving more. I feel like he was driving a lot more in the first half. I think the physicality really kind of weighed on him in that second half, and so that's going to be something they certainly have to address really just heading into the postseason, because yeah, the physicality is going to be there in the postseason, but it's, again, you're going to get battle tested in these final games of the regular season. You're playing against some physical teams, and the Knicks are absolutely no exception. Dyson Daniels in this one also chipped in with a double-double. He was incredible on the boards. He had 11 points and 12 rebounds. 12 rebounds from your one of your guards is just ridiculous. I guess Dyson's technically playing the 3, but he's handling the ball a whole lot. He's a guard. CJ McCollum, who almost hit one of the craziest shots in Atlanta Hawks history, he had 17 points in this one, including 3 made triples. And another interesting storyline from this game was that we also saw veteran center Tony Bradley make his Atlanta Hawks debut after being signed earlier in the day. He's here for the sole purpose of, kind of just like stabilizing the front court while Zach Langley recovers from his injury that, he suffered because of the dirty play from Goga Bitadze, which just sucks. Horrible timing. But yeah, Bradley made his debut, and he did not look very good. I'll be just completely honest. Like, he was getting a few rebounds. He was looking solid on the boards, but that was really the only aspect of the game that he looked solid. Again, though, like, even Quinn Snyder noted post-game, he was like, I put him in an unfair position, which he absolutely did. Put him in very early, and then, gave him the tough task of defending Mitchell Robinson, who has been, who always has been like a kind of a common denominator in terms of, the Knicks defeating the Hawks, like Mitchell Robinson's work on the boards and really just interior presence. That gives the Hawks problems, and Tony Bradley checking in for his Atlanta Hawks debut and having to defend him, like, that was destined to fail. And while he's like on paper probably a good physical matchup for him, I think that was kind of Quinn Snyder's original intent. Bradley just clearly was not up to game speed. He looked very slow out there, if I'm being completely honest. I don't think that's going to be a thing that continues. I think that he'll get it together, but he just looked very, very uncomfortable in his minutes that he played. I'm sure if you guys were all watching, you guys understand what I'm talking about. And there's a reason he played like 4 minutes, and then, Quinn Snyder subbed him out, and then he didn't play again. Again, just did not look up to game speed whatsoever. That's going to take training. That's going to take more practices with the team. That'll come eventually, but hopefully that's not a thing we have to talk about for too long, because hopefully Zach Langley can be back for the postseason. I don't know if he'll be there for like game 1 or 2, though, and it's just we're going to have to adjust. We're going to have to adapt. Even Mo Gay was in an uncomfortable position last night because, he was playing more backup center minutes, as the game progressed, and that just wasn't really looking too great, if I'm being completely honest. Ultimately, though, like everything said, this game came down to execution late, as it usually does, and really just the late brilliance of Jalen Brunson, who wasn't even having really a great game for most of the game, and then he just lit it up in the fourth quarter. I mean, that fourth quarter, he's proving why he won Clutch Player of the Year a couple of years ago. I mean, he deserves it. I mean, he was very clutch. He finished this game with 30 points and 13 assists, just completely taking over in the fourth quarter with 17 points alone. Again, he had 13. and then he just lit it up in the fourth. And every time Atlanta tried to, kind of threaten to regain control, like Brunson had an answer, and it was really kind of just deflating watching him just pick apart our defense after really just a dominant night from our defense up to that point. Karl Anthony Towns was also a very major factor. In this one, he finished with 21 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists. He dominated stretches of the third quarter, scoring 14 points in that period and helping the Knicks swing momentum with a 17-6 run late in the quarter. And so that run gave New York an 81-79 lead heading into the fourth quarter, and from there, it became a back-and-forth battle as it usually does, and it ultimately slipped away from Atlanta. Again, it happens. Zach Langley, if he was healthy in this game, we probably win. His absence definitely limited Atlanta's front court, and especially against a big physical team like the New York Knicks, could have very well used him because they have some very quality big depth. So at the end of the day, yes, this is a very tough loss, but it's not one that should shake any sort of confidence with this squad. Saw all the right things, just couldn't pull it out late. If anything, it showed that even against one of the East top teams, the Hawks can go toe-to-toe until the very end. And honestly, I think we're proving ourselves as one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. And now moving on to our second segment, which also really just kind of relates to this last game because this was what we're talking about did happen last night in the game against the New York Knicks, but it's just very much worth noting because it is history. Even in defeat, history was made, and of course, it's none other than Nickeil Alexander-Walker who's out here making history. Kind of taking a look back a little bit. I mean, Nickeil has been nothing short of absolutely phenomenal in his first season as an Atlanta Hawk. I mean, probably the quickest way anyone has ever kind of like won over the fan base, the way Nickeil has shown up since opening night and just been incredibly consistent and durable and just he's been incredible. Like that's really all I can really chalk it up to. He's been defending. He's been defending some of the best players on the opposing teams while also being maybe the best scorer on the court, often, whoever we play. Like he's been incredible. He's dictated the pace of the game. He's gotten out to hot starts, but also maintained his production through the course of the night, like literally every night. This guy has been remarkable. I think that's like some of the quickest I've ever bought someone's jersey just because, he's been incredible. On Monday night, last night against the New York Knicks, despite the loss, he etched his name into the Hawks record books. He was already making his way there, but yeah, he's officially in the Hawks record books now. In that game, he hit 7 3-pointers. Again, 7 threes. Are you kidding me? Obviously that contributed to his 36 points for the night. 7 threes is going to be something you do every night. But hey, the consistency that he shows, like this is a reason why he has this very high volume because he can knock them down at a very consistent clip. And the funny thing is, like really all of these made 3-pointers, like I'm sure if I take a look back at the tape and everything, I could, for sure, like pick out like some that were open, but like just the eye test, like and just what I remember from last night being there, I don't know if a single one of his 3-point makes was an uncontested 3. Again, I'm sure there was. I'm sure this is an exaggeration, but from what I can remember, this guy literally had a hand in his face every single time. Sometimes he had like 2 hands in his face, and I mean, this guy just was knocking down contested shot after contested shot. But that said, knocking down 7 threes in this made game, Alexander Walker officially set the Atlanta Hawks franchise record for most 3-pointers made in a single season. 241 3-pointers made this season. That breaks Bogdan Bogdanovic's previous record of 240. Just think about that for a second. Think about all the incredible 3-point shooters the Atlanta Hawks have had, since their birth, since they've existed. Like they have had some remarkable 3-point shooters. And Nickeil, while he's obviously not there and like total made 3-pointers for an Atlanta Hawk, he'll probably get there eventually. But just in terms of a single season and just dominating the outside from a single season, like look at some of these names. Like he surpasses names like Kyle Korver, who's known as a top 5 or 6 3-point shooter of all time. Where would y'all rank Kyle Korver? I'd probably put him at 5, maybe. Maybe that's a little bit high. Maybe that's a little too low. Let me know that down below. Where would you rank Kyle Korver? Anyways, that's not really on topic. But also Trae Young. He passes Trae Young, who obviously was a cornerstone of this franchise before being traded earlier this season to the Washington Wizards. And it just puts into perspective how remarkable of an accomplishment this is, and it is a true testament to the overall growth that Nickeil Alexander-Walker has shown this season. And seeing him like etched in history books, like he's just very deserving. It wasn't just about volume either. This isn't a guy just throwing up shots and just getting lucky every now and then and doing it inefficiently. It was about efficiency and confidence as well. Alexander Walker actually finished the night 12 of 19 from the field and 7 for 11 from beyond the arc. That is unreal efficiency. 36 points in 39 minutes. Just incredible output. Every time he touched the ball, it felt like something positive was going to happen. And that's exactly why Atlanta targeted him in the offseason. Obviously in the sign-and trade deal that we did this past offseason, with the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Hawks made a clear statement. They wanted more shooting, more versatility, and more two-way impact. We were looking to kind of improve around the margins defensively, but also provide us with some consistent three-point shooting. And Nikhil, we thought we were getting that in kind of like a role player form from Nikhil, but he has just met those expectations and just completely, exceeded them. He's been remarkable. He's delivered on all fronts and more. He's not just a shooter or just a defender. He's a complete basketball player. He's also kind of taken his playmaking up a notch this season. The growth cannot be overstated, and this is why he absolutely deserves Most Improved Player. Just defending at a high level, creating his own shot, also fitting seamlessly into the system. Like it was said before the season, and this has obviously been revealed later in the season, but him and Quinn Snyder talked, and Quinn envisioned a bigger role from him that he had not necessarily ever played in. And he has just, again, exceeded every ounce of expectations that we have set on him. Now, just 3 games remaining in the regular season, and his impact could be the difference between Atlanta securing a top 6 seed or even falling into the play-in tournament, because that is still a possibility. Despite all this talk about potential playoff matchups and just how the season has progressed and how much better we've gotten, it's still possible we fall into the play-in, so we got to take care of business. We definitely have stuff in our favor considering how we've taken care of business since the All-Star break. But, right now the Hawks are holding on to the 5th seed, but it is a tight race. Cannot overlook any opponent, and Nikhil certainly is not. We're just 2 games over the 7th seed, mind you. There's very little room for error, and so the remaining schedule includes a home-and-home series against the Cleveland Cavaliers, followed by the regular season finale in Miami against the Heat. 3 games, everything on the line. Nikhil certainly should play up to his competition as he has. If Atlanta manages to hold on to their position, will be one of the biggest reasons why. Now, looking at kind of like these upcoming matchups, take the matchup last night, and then you look at the upcoming 2. This really relates to it. And also, just who we could potentially face in a playoff series. A very interesting segment for you guys. We're entering the final stretch of the regular season. We've been in the final stretch of the regular season. Actually, Quinn Snyder last night in the postgame press conference was saying, these are our playoffs. And, while on the outside that might sound as a little bit of a concerning statement, kind of alarming, are you really kind of thinking that you're going to make any sort of deep run? Talking about some, these are our playoffs, but they're saying that in a perspective of just the intensity that they want to play with. These are the playoffs now. I love that mentality, honestly. It kind of took me a second to be what are you talking about, Quinn? But I do get it, and so the focus is obviously on the playoffs, but also on the right now because, again, they're considering these the playoffs as well. The outlook for the Atlanta Hawks is a bit intriguing. Obviously I've said that we could fall into the play-in tournament, but the more likely scenario, considering we are 1.5 games ahead of the 6th seed right now, we're the 5th seed, the likeliest scenario is that we are in the playoffs and we do avoid the play-in for the first time since the 2021 season. Thanks to that late season surge, they put themselves in position to avoid the play-in altogether. This is a significant achievement just in itself. Regardless of what even happens in the postseason, the climb from the 10 seed, which is what we were really at the start of March, to where we are now. Pat yourselves on the back, Atlanta Hawks, because it's been remarkable. But now it's kind of up to you to dictate how far you can go. Because this team could either be a first round exit, they could go to the NBA Finals. There's really it's how open the Eastern Conference is, and so we're looking at, let's not look at the right now immediate or too far down the line. Let's look at who they could potentially face in the first round. It makes it even more interesting. So at the 5 or the 6 seed, whatever that is, let's completely rule out, for this hypothetical scenario, let's rule out who, let's rule out, falling into the play-in tournament. Let's completely disregard that as a potential scenario. At the 5 or the 6 seed, Atlanta would either match up against the New York Knicks or the Cleveland Cavaliers. There's a lot of, they're very close in the standings, so it could be either or, but also the Hawks and the 6th seed are very close in the standings, so that could go either way as well. So that's why I kind of open up the floor, really, and open up the options that we could potentially have, the Knicks or the Cavs. And so, 2 are very different teams, but neither is an impossible matchup to win. In fact, I do I wouldn't say favor the Hawks in a series against either team, but there are some clear vulnerabilities that the Hawks could exploit, regardless of who we face. So let's start with the New York Knicks. Now, obviously, the Knicks are at the top of our minds because we did play them last night. We lost, but again, so many positive things to take away from that game. Just looking at them holistically, just kind of as what they've built from a team standpoint, while they do have some solid depth in terms of Mitchell Robinson and really maybe a Deuce McBride, it gets a little murky if we're looking at their bench. And so overall, they're a team that's pretty reliant on their starting 5. That's not necessarily a bad thing because I think the Hawks kind of right now are as well. But we do have some quality depth as well. So again, two teams in similar situations, but they've got Jalen Brunson orchestrating the offense, Karl Anthony Towns stretching the floor and also driving. They're a tough team that's going to that we're going to be able to defend in a 7-game series. They can physically break you down. They can play quick, but they can also break you down in the half court, making them a dangerous opponent. But beyond their core, their starting five, and maybe Mitchell Robinson, there are questions for sure, especially in a playoff environment. Depth has been an issue over the course of the season for the New York Knicks. Also coaching, Mike Brown, I do think is a very solid coach, but Knicks fans have had a lot of complaints about him this season, and I don't know necessarily if he's the right coach for them. And I don't think they've really made any sort of improvements or showcase that they can make a run, more than they had with like Tibbs. I don't know if there's much of a difference there. Defensively also, they can be pretty inconsistent. Hawks can take advantage of that, especially against teams with strong perimeter play. And that's where Atlanta thrives. You look at players like Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dyson Daniels. Those are both elite perimeter defenders who can disrupt opposing guards, and offensively, they're great as well. Atlanta's been one of the most efficient three-point shooting teams in the league since the All-Star break, and they're obviously looking to carry that into the postseason. If that series against the New York Knicks in particular turns into a shootout, like Onyeka Okongwu versus Karl Anthony Towns at the center position, just lighting it up from three, that actually plays into Atlanta's favor. If you can take on a Knicks team and it can turn into shootouts, like kind of different from what we saw last night, but again, it's different in the playoffs. Atlanta can really take advantage of that, and I would like our odds if it turns into a shootout, because I do think we have more talented shooters just from 1 to 5 and also into our depth. Now looking at the Cleveland Cavaliers, it is a different challenge entirely. The Cavaliers are a very tough opponent, but honestly, I do think I like a playoff series against the Cavs more. I wouldn't be not confident if we played the New York Knicks in the first round. Like I would not be like over the moon about it, but I at least think we could play up to that challenge, and I would not doubt us too much. The Cavaliers, this is a series we can win. And it's not for many reasons you may think. Like, obviously, the Cavs bring size, physicality, and a dominant front court led by Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. And so, like, on paper, on the surface, the Cavs have a size advantage in the front court. So, a lot of people think we're just going to be getting bullied down there, and it's not going to be a favorable matchup. But then you really look at the rest of the roster. Obviously, when talking about Mobley and Allen specifically, like that's when the pressure shifts to Jalen Johnson and Onyeka Okongwu. They're going to have to play, really tough defensively. They're going to have to find something. They're going to have to play Mo Gay a lot. They're going to have to work out something. We're going to really hope Jock Landale can come back if that is a series. I'll say that. Regardless, though, if those two can at least hold their own on the inside, defending some of these dominant bigs, it opens the door for Atlanta's guards to take over the series, because in this series, Atlanta can really create an undeniable advantage in the backcourt. The Hawks have the clear advantage here. When you compare backcourts, the Hawks stand out. And again, not for reasons you may expect, because Cleveland has a very, very, very talented backcourt, And looking at Atlanta, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dyson Daniels, again, they're not only elite defenders, but they're also incredibly capable offensive creators. They are very good offensively. They have very different skill sets offensively. That kind of versatility and the kind of like two-way attack and different ways that they can attack a defense. It's very different, and it's going to give Cleveland's guards something that they have not seen for much of the season. Players like Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, both incredible offensive initiators. I'm not denying that at all. Donovan Mitchell is an elite scorer. James Harden is obviously still an elite scorer and very, very good facilitator. They have been known to struggle defensively. They're actually both known as defensive liabilities. The thing about Atlanta's guards, what's different from them, obviously I don't think they're really as good as, Nickeil's probably, on that same tier at this point of a offensive player like a Donovan Mitchell or a James Harden. That might be stretching it, honestly. Now, as I'm saying that out loud, it may sound like a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think it's too ridiculous. Like, he's at least in a similar tier. But then again, the difference between him and then those two guards is Nickeil can defend his ass off. He is a very, very good defender. And so is Dyson Daniels. Dyson Daniels is one of the best defenders in the entire NBA. So the Hawks have guys who have real attack potential on both ends of the floor, while Cleveland has two offensive specialists. You see the difference there? You see why I think Atlanta can exploit that? I mean, that two-way balance could be the deciding factor in a playoff series. And really that, and combined with everything else, these are the reasons why teams around the league are trying to avoid this Hawks squad in the first round. I think both the Knicks and the Cavs are trying really, really hard at the end of this season, just so they could potentially avoid the red-hot Atlanta Hawks in the first round, because I think that they are a terrifying first-round opponent, because not only do they have, veterans that have been in these situations before, but they have some youth that is just ready to absolutely soar once they get into their first postseason experience, because it's going to be up and down. But again, you got the veterans to stabilize it. You got a guy in Nickeil Alexander-Walker who's been to back-to-back Western Conference Finals and is coming over to the Eastern Conference where it's presumably easier. We're in good shape, guys. This is not your typical 5 or 6 seed. This is a team that's peaking at the right time. They've got confidence. They're building such undeniable chemistry, and they've got a clear identity, and they're going to be a dangerous, dangerous squad in the postseason. And now moving on to our fourth and final segment. The viewer comment segment, giving you guys a voice to be heard in the Atlanta Hawks community and giving me a chance to respond to some of your hot takes, some of your bold opinions, and things that make the basketball world go around. I've loved implementing this segment. I see all of your comments. I appreciate them all. Can't get to them all. That's why I've implemented this here. And so now, first up, coldest to ever do it, said Koloko has been horrible. Obviously this is in response to, and Koloko hasn't been playing, obviously, but this was in response to, the thing I was talking about yesterday of how, I was a little bit surprised that Christian Koloko did not get the call up and that they elected to go external and sign Tony Bradley. I'm still pretty confused about that, if I'm being entirely honest, because I don't think they're very different as players. Tony Bradley has the I guess the playoff experience, but also I just don't think that is going to be the craziest difference and just difference maker in general. But yeah, looking at Koloko in his season in Atlanta as a whole, obviously he came. Sorry, I accidentally kicked on the desk that I have my laptop on, so if that was a loud noise, I apologize. But Koloko got off to a really hot start in his Atlanta Hawks tenure. He was making people. I honestly, I'll never forget some of the comments that you guys made when Koloko played his first 2 or 3 games in Atlanta. Talking about some, Koloko needs to be our long-term starting center. Koloko, needs to start over Okongwu right now. Because he had some really solid games off the bench. He was looking like a clear, difference maker. He was looking like an interior presence that Atlanta has needed for some time. His minutes next to Jalen Johnson specifically, because this was when Onyeka Okongwu was really struggling defensively, and so was Jalen Johnson. But then, when you have that shift and a guy who is a good defender, next to Jalen Johnson, and also has the size, Hawks fans were loving what they were seeing, and I loved what I was seeing as well. He was great at first, but then, as the season kind of unfolded, Christian Koloko kind of came back down to reality, kind of became the player that Koloko has developed a reputation for becoming, which isn't a bad player. I won't give him that horrible tag. I do think that's a little harsh, a little bit too much of a, overstatement, but he definitely hasn't. The way he's been playing has not been ideal, which is, again, if he had kept up what he had done in the first few games as an Atlanta Hawk, and just kept it consistent over the course of the season in the minutes that he got, he probably would be the guy that they called up. But again, the inconsistencies and yes, the subpar play is what ultimately led to them, going external and bringing in Tony Bradley. Appreciate the comment. Next up, at Justice4G said, defensive rating and on-off numbers don't tell you much when they can be hugely impacted by others in the lineup. That's true, but also I do think centers in particular, I think it is a little bit more telling. Now obviously, guards, it is a little skewed. And not even just defensive rating and on-off numbers, even some more advanced statistics just even plus minus, really. Plus minus is always very skewed, so I don't necessarily look at that with too much weight. Obviously, sometimes and oftentimes, when a player's plus minus is really high, or really low, it can be telling, especially when it's a clear difference from everyone else in the lineup. But I in the specific context that this was brought up, which was the Onyeka Okongwu defensive shout, I don't think that this was very skewed, because we've also had our complaints about Jalen Johnson defensively, and while I don't think Jalen's a very positive defender right now, him and Onyeka's chemistry in the front court on both ends of the floor has been solid defensively over, since All-Star break. And so, yes, defensive rating, those can be skewed. But I just think in this specific context, it was not. On-off numbers, they honestly tell you a little bit more than a specific defensive rating, because again, you're seeing some guys with known horrible reputations on the defensive end have some of these solid defensive ratings, because again, on a talented defensive team, I don't think CJ McCollum's a very good defender, but I think CJ McCollum, I haven't really looked at his specific on-off numbers and defensive rating, but it's probably not bad at all, just considering playing alongside Nickeil and Dyson, it'll make it a lot easier. So yeah, it is hugely impacted by others in the lineup, but in the specific context of Onyeka Okongwu and maybe even Jalen Johnson, I do think it is a little bit different. Appreciate the comment. And then finally, at James Edwards 7946 said, Koloko time to suit up and kick ass. We'll probably see Asa also tonight. This is obviously before last game. Unfortunately, Asa did not play. Asa is not going to be in the plans for the rest of this season. I'll straight up say that. but I don't think that's like the huge like bold statement or some shocking report. He's not really going to play for the rest of the season unless teams are kind of like resting their starters, which I don't think is going to be the case because I think there's too much on the line as the season comes to a close. I think teams there's too much movement that can happen, and too many teams are relying on how these final 3 games shake out. So I loved what I saw from him over the course of the season in the limited minutes that he got, but I do think it was a right decision to let him develop in College Park. And so, yeah, I do think he'll probably be in the rotation next season, but it's not going to be for the rest of this season. I don't think they want to put a rookie in that playoff environment, especially considering what Quinn Snyder said last night about, like this is our playoff rotation now, like in direct response to talking about why, Zach only played 7 minutes last night, which was a career low. He said like this is a playoff environment. We're not really like, breaking down like exactly how many minutes Zach is playing, just what he's able to contribute in the limited minutes that he gets, and then how he can potentially look forward to a bigger role potentially next year. And then also Koloko, like it's just a frustrating situation because it is confusing. I just wish he took more advantage of the minutes that he got past those past those like first like 3 or 4 games in a Hawks uniform. If he kept that up, again, as I said, he would be the guy that got the call up, and it wouldn't have been Bradley. But I don't know, maybe like if Tony Bradley continues playing like he played last night, which I don't think he will, but if he does, maybe he gets cut, and then maybe Koloko gets the call up, and then we go from there. I wouldn't be opposed to giving him some looks over these final 2 or 3 games. Again, if they're not comfortable in Tony Bradley, and they're not comfortable with running Mo Gay at the full-time backup center, it's a lot to consider. But if he does play, I do hope he suits up and he kicks ass. But I appreciate all the comments, guys. But that's gonna do it for today's episode of Hawks Latest. If you guys enjoyed today's breakdown, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single update here on the channel. We're going to be pumping out videos every single day, keep you guys informed on the latest and the greatest regarding the Atlanta Hawks. But let me know down below in the comments what were your thoughts on the loss last night. It was a tough one, it was a close one, but you can't win them all. I thought there was a lot of positives to take away from there, so I can't be too mad. Let me know that down below. Also, let me know your thoughts on Nickeil Alexander-Walker making history last night, breaking the single-season Atlanta Hawks franchise record for most three-pointers made. Just an incredible feat, just really a testament to who he has become as a player this season and how great he's been overall. Let me know that down below, and then also, finally, let me know what would your thoughts be on a potential playoff series against either the Cleveland Cavaliers or the New York Knicks. Who would you rather face in round 1, the Cavs or the Knicks? Let me know that down below. I'll probably break down even more of your comments tomorrow, talking about like who you would rather face. So seriously, let me know that down below. But once again, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Zach Langley, and I will see you guys next time.